what you did is so important in terms of allowing a partner in. And sometimes that's a real challenge for people to do. But they also, that's how the other parent is going to develop the bond. If they don't get that time, then they don't get an opportunity to form that bond, right? So it's for both of you. It's really crucial.
Welcome to Imperfect Momming. Our children are constantly looking to us for examples. The term role model doesn't quite cut it here. We are shaping their worldview with every move we make. You see, it's not in the lectures we give or moments where we're actively attempting to teach them. It's in the micro movements we make, the unconscious ways in which we navigate life. We are constantly teaching our children how to show up for themselves, their friends, their future partners, and even their future children. So what can we do to ensure we are raising thoughtful, compassionate, self-aware human beings? We have to become them ourselves. No one is perfect, but we can all still be better, and it starts with self-healing. Let's get to it.
Welcome back to Imperfect Momming, and I'm your host, Alicia Lyons, and we have a very special guest today, Lisa Erickson. Welcome to Imperfect Momming.
Thank you, Alicia, for having me. Really happy to be here.
Absolutely. So tell us a little bit about who you are and what you do.
Well, I am an energy worker, a meditation teacher. I offer both workshops and private sessions, but especially within the context of motherhood, which I know is a big theme, obviously, for your podcast. I work a lot with women on balancing their energy. That may mean their commitments across work and home and family. I also work with what's called the mother-child energy line in energy work. And just backing up a little bit, energy work, I really comes from these traditions of energy medicine and some spiritual traditions that posit we have an energy body or an energy anatomy that connects to both our physical body and our psyche or spirit. And a lot of things have come into our culture that in fact are based in energy teachings. Yoga is, acupuncture is, so it's not really quite as separate from our mainstream culture as people might think.
Yeah, as it I would imagine as it used to be for a while. Right before or right after I asked you to introduce yourself, I looked right behind you and I was like, oh, she's got some energy stuff going on.
I got mandalas, I've got a quartz crystal. Yeah, these are mandalas, which are kind of sacred geometry, and even plants, right? They're a big part of energetic teachings as well.
So tell me about the mother-daughter line, because I'm a daughter and I have a mother, and tell me you're interested in that.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting when you think about it. There are certain relationships. The subtle body is linked to our physical body, and there really is no other relationship that is physically built in quite the same way in terms of birthing a child, etc. So although we have energy lines and energy exchange really with everyone in our life, there is something unique about the mother-child energy line. It is taught that it forms in a lot of traditions that it really mirrors the umbilical cord at birth. So it links to what is considered kind of the second chakra in women, which is tied to the pelvic area, and the navel chakra in a child, which is tied to the whole belly area. And we all have all of these different energy centers or chakras. So we talk sometimes about the fourth trimester, and I think to many of us it feels that way. Like once your child is born, for those first few months, you don't know where your energy begins and theirs ends, their emotions and yours, and it can be quite jarring. So that's an example of when that line is completely open. And what the teachings really are is that as a child grows older, they become more separate from us, literally energetic, and that line kind of closes down. But it has certain developmental markers along the way. You don't really need to know all of this, except if you're having problems with that line, which is for some women, it may be drawing that separation, balancing their own energy with their child, being able to self-care, perhaps not being able to ever shut down the line, even when their child is being cared for by someone else. And so then they're just constantly exhausted, or carrying their child's emotions for them, which actually, as they hit a certain age, doesn't help them at all. So that's when these can be helpful. And of course, with your own mother, same thing. As an adult, that line should really pretty much be dormant, right? It's now an emotion. It's now a regular relationship, but sometimes there can be things that are occurring along that line, exchanges that maybe aren't helpful.
Yeah, I think that the biggest struggle that I see with moms is in that in everything that you just described, that energetic connection where they don't know the separation between themselves and their child, and they lose themselves inside this role of I'm a mother now. And then the more that they don't have that connection to themselves, and their themselves is wrapped up into their child, as our children grow up and separate from us naturally and as it's supposed to be, we get this feeling of like, I don't know who I am anymore. And I think that that creates a lot of the tension in the teen years. And a lot of the, what is it called? When the empty nest syndrome.
Yeah, which I am a recent empty nester. So I have a junior in college and I have twins that are freshmen in college. So really quickly, we went from a very full house to a very empty house. And so definitely have felt this in a whole new way, even though I'd worked with women through this transit a long time. And yeah, it reflects in so many different ways. How that can reflect postpartum is a mother who really just can't even take any time to care for herself, right? Even if the resources are available to allow her to do so. You know, there's this psychological, I have to be there every moment. And then throughout the child's life, not allowing them to independently flourish has a price to us when they do leave home, but also a price to them because they don't develop that resilience and that emotional independence, knowing how to manage their own emotions, because we've been processing them for them through this energetic line. And it comes from this protective instinct, but it isn't really our job, and it isn't even possible to prevent all hurt or disappointment, right? We can't. Really what our job is to help them learn how to handle that when it occurs. And that's really what this energy line work is really all about. So it is psychological sometimes, and it's also, you know, kind of technical in a way. Some women, it's easier to connect on that level if the psychological is too charged, too emotional for them.
I don't know what, when I only had one son, and my sister came to stay with me for the first 6 weeks of his life because his dad was deployed. And so she was in school, so she was gone for 8 hours a day, and she'd come back and she would take him for an hour. And whether I needed that hour or not, like consciously aware of needing it, I took it. And I know that that was super supportive for me. And then when his dad did come back, he was very attentive, and we had sort of opposite schedules. So I would get to sleep through the night, minus when my son needed to be fed. His dad would bring him to me, and I'd feed him, and then he'd take him away. Like it was, I couldn't have asked for a better supportive experience that I will admit that I didn't fully appreciate at the time, because I didn't have anybody else's experience. So I didn't know what other moms experience. And the question that came to my mind while you were talking was like, is part of this energetic problem that we're having because we don't have villages anymore to help with raising the children?
I do think there's a cultural component for sure. And that my parents also live far away. So they would come, and it was such a gift when they would come in terms of being able to have that support, because mostly I didn't have it. And many women don't. Many could also be a husband home, right? Many people don't have that support, and it is a real challenge of our society. And then we have the conditioning around sort of helicopter parenting, that we have made parenting such a high pressure thing. Like there's one right way to do it, and there's always this fear around if you're doing it wrong. Are you giving solid foods too early? What if they're doing a pacifier? And then as it gets older, it's more and more, are they in the right extracurriculars? Are they socializing enough? there's so much fear and anxiety around it, and all of that, in addition to the lack of support and the shift that somehow raising a child isn't like involving a lot of people, right? That shift away from that. What you did is so important in terms of allowing a partner in. And sometimes that's a real challenge for people to do. But they also, that's how the other parent is going to develop the bond. If they don't get that time, then they don't get an opportunity to form that bond, right? So it's for both of you. It's really crucial.
And I usually get to the mom after there's been, several years, like where mom expresses that dad doesn't want to help. And because I haven't been there from the beginning, I can't see like, well, did he offer? And you said no every time he offered, and so now he stops offering, or you criticized.
Exactly.
Yeah. And a lot of times that's what's happening in chores and housework and stuff like that, where men don't necessarily do it the same way that the mom would do it. And so they're like, well, I'll just do it myself. And it's like, sometimes done is better than perfect. Like, it just needs to be done so that they can contribute and it doesn't have to all fall on your plate.
Absolutely. And so we have to work on, sometimes I'm working with a woman around, why does she feel it has to be done a certain way? And when we feel like everything has to be, it is again part of that anxiety instinct. Like, if I can just control everything and make it perfect, that's what it means to be a good mom. And if someone has any sort of trauma or maybe dysfunction in their own family background, they're more likely to have that pattern. They want to get it right. They're so invested in making it perfect, but it tips over into a control tendency and a criticism tendency. And so then that is also emotional and energetic work around repatterning that, being able to let go, let things be different than you might see it. And we have so much valuable research now that the way men tend to play with kids has all these other potential benefits to them. And you just have to let that be and not be like, no, you just have to let it, within, obviously there's a line, but you have to let it play out. My husband did totally different things with my kids. He loved to build giant Lego villages and train sets with all three. I have 2 girls and a boy. I never really was into that, but that was a big part of their childhood, right? That they didn't get from me. So yeah, to let it be.
Yeah, it's all important, and it doesn't. And I think that there's a large problem with it's my way or the highway.
Yes.
In our families.
Yeah. And another specialty of mine, I said women's energetics, but another is trauma healing. And that's why I mentioned that, because I actually find it's very prevalent and this is also documented kind of in therapeutic settings. If someone has experienced any sort of abuse or dysfunction in their own childhood, they tend to be even more likely to be controlling. So that's something to look at. It's like, okay, I'll keep my own kids safe by making, overprotecting, making things over-controlled. So sometimes there's someone's own healing, a woman's own healing that needs to occur for her to be able to rebalance this line.
Yeah. And that's why this podcast is called Better Parenting Through Self-Healing.
Exactly. No, that's the main thing you learn as a parent, right?
Yeah.
Anything you have not faced, it will be thrown into your face, basically.
Yeah. And I don't know who I was talking to, but they said, I want to heal all of my stuff before having a kid. And I said, that is a very noble goal. And as soon as you have a kid, all of those files are going to be childhood traumas are going to be unlocked that you may have not touched yet. I mentioned the other day that when my son and his friend were teasing his friend's daughter, that it was a trigger for me because of when I was a kid and I had 2 brothers and I was teased a lot when she's telling them to stop and they're not stopping. And I explained to him, I was like, I didn't even know this was a thing for me, but it's a thing and I need you to stop.
Yeah. It's interesting for me because I moved all the time. I was actually Air Force brat, Air Force child. So I moved a lot growing up, and I really thought of it as mostly a positive thing, meaning it made me social and adaptable. What's interesting is I realized when my kids hit school, I was overly fearful about them fitting in and their social status because I was the new kid so much. My kids had a totally different upbringing. We stayed in the same neighborhood, kindergarten. They have kids, friends they had since kindergarten all the way, to leaving for college. But I was always worried about them being the outsider to the point of anxiety that they actually didn't feel. And that was really my own stuff that I didn't even realize was still there, right? And I think that's what happens throughout parenting, the parenting journey.
Yeah, and it's good that you're kind of in this work and figuring those things out and finding those things. And I've been assigned this week to like write down all of my triggers and to share them in a group of my friends next week. And I've been doing this for so long that doesn't even sound remotely scary to me. I was like, oh, cool. I can write because I have triggers. I know that they're there. I resolve them in the moment to the best of my ability, but there's always something deeper.
That's right.
And so this is going to be exciting to see what happens next.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's really the way I work at like what we call triggers in other settings. To me, they're like imprints. We have these habits and we think of them as they're neurological patterns. We know that, right? You have these responses that have been conditioned in based on your experiences. Maybe some are also genetic. It's really interesting, that interplay, right? That's the other thing as a parent that is really remarkable, the nature, nurture, sorting that out, right? But then from an energy body perspective, they're considered to be kind of written into your energy imprints. And so you work with different chakras, different energy centers, different techniques to help you rewrite them. And you have to always think about, well, what would I replace that with, right? What would I replace that with? What would be another way of being around for me, the trigger of social anxiety on behalf of my kids, right? What would be another way of being around that? A sense of openness, a sense of I'll be there for them if they need me, but I don't need to interfere. Like, what would that feel like in your body? And you're practicing feeling that so that when the trigger comes up, you see it and you have a reference point for trying to shift. So that's kind of an interesting way to think about triggers.
It is. And I think what I've struggled with even more as a parent is like the experiences that my son has that I didn't have. He's been teased a lot more at school than I ever was. And I don't even know how to deal with it really, because it's not like I was bullied for who knows, I don't know how long, but it wasn't a very long amount of time. My mom said, well, just kill them with kindness. And I rolled my eyes because that's what you do when you're 13. And mom tells you to kill them with kindness, but I did it and it stopped and the bullying stopped. And I was like, ooh, this works. Like,
yeah,
but that's not working for him. And we've kind of told him to lean into the skid, basically, like join in with, but he's sensitive. So it took him a long time to get to that point that it hurt his feelings for a long time. But now I see him kind of joking around a little bit more.
Oh, good. Yeah. Well, and it is hard now because there's a whole nother component that most of us didn't have to deal with in terms of social media and things happening outside of school. So at least when there was bullying in the past, when you went home, you were away from it. And now it's a different situation that all of us as parents, have had to navigate and figure out. It's a whole nother ballgame.
Definitely. I'm pausing. I'm not encouraging the social media game just yet.
Yeah.
He got a phone probably too early. Hindsight's 2020, but I'm not gonna push on the social media or
Yeah. Well, and boys are less into it, was my experience. More maybe they are exchanging maybe through games or things like that. They're socializing as opposed to the traditional social media. And and it's a whole thing. And that is another whole balance. And it's really, well, what are you trying to teach your kids? This sense of their inner core, that however other people are treating them, whatever's going on, that isn't really about them. It's about the other person, right? And you're an idea in their head, and all of this stuff around really who you are and strengthening from the inside.
Yeah, I had told him, hurt people.
Yeah.
And I think that he heard it so much that maybe it lost its meaning. But when we rephrased it, and I don't remember what we said now, but there was a rephrase of like, this person is hurting, and the only way they know how to deal with it is to try to make you hurt too.
Yeah.
And it sucks because when someone hurts you, you just want to hurt them. Like, that's the reaction, is that you want to hurt them back. But at the same time, that's the reason that they're doing it in the first place, which is why killing them with kindness actually does work.
Yeah. They're not getting the reaction that they are looking for. Yeah.
And someone's actually being nice to them.
Yeah.
Too.
And maybe it softens. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and talk about wanting to hurt back. I mean, this is something that comes up in parents too, right? Your kids will sometimes really hurt your feelings. And it's that learning to deal with that reaction that happens inside of you, and having the skills to take a breath and not respond in a way that hurts them back. Or if you do, because it happens, being able later to go back and address it and heal. You know, this is all the real messiness of parenting.
Absolutely. Yeah. Is there a piece of advice that you want to share with moms listening?
I think, yeah, it really is all around self-care and balancing your own needs with those of your child, and really thinking in terms of how much energy is going into them. And at different ages, it should be less, not in terms of time, but in terms of how much are you managing their emotions and their life. How much energy are you exchanging? When they are sad, it's natural for you to feel sad, but are you actually like, your day is ruined because they've had a disappointment? Then there's something else going on with that line that you need to work on. So really, really ask yourself at each stage of your kid's life, am I allowing them to become more independent? And if not, is it me? Is it something is in need in me that I need to heal? That's really my main advice.
And there's a phrase out there that says, a mom is only as happy as her saddest child. And I think that that's the most unhealthiest way of expressing what a mom is and does. Like, I don't think that we're supposed to feel as sad as them. I think we're supposed to support them. But it doesn't have to destroy our own happiness.
Yeah. I think to me, it's really the difference between empathy and compassion. You want to have compassion and be able to support, but not actually take on their emotions for them. That's not what you do once they've hit a certain age, right? We kind of do that when they're babies, but not when they're older. And that's the art of parenting. It really changes all along the road, each step.
It does. Yeah. Is there a book that's been instrumental in your personal development journey?
Well, because I do orient in terms of chakras and meditation, a lot of books like that. And I tried to write one, right? I have one that is for me a good guide, but I like a lot of energy work of Cindy Dale. She was one of my main mentors. But in terms of parenting books, and this dates me somewhat because it's been out for a while, I really liked How to Talk to Your Kids So Kids Will Listen, and Listen So Kids Will Talk. And it really is, to me, sort of the communication version of getting this right, like how to allow them to speak and be able to listen. And you actually get more information than when you're trying to tell or ask so many questions that they get overwhelmed. And there's just so many good examples in it. Yeah.
And I don't think that I've ever actually read a parenting book per se. Like, my favorite book is Dr. Dan Siegel and Dr. Tina Bryson, and they wrote No Drama Discipline, but really kind of a personal development book disguised as a parenting book. But those are the kinds of parenting books that I like, is the personal development ones.
Yeah.
And where can our listeners find you?
They can find me at enlightenedenergetics.com and Instagram and Facebook at Chakra Empowerment. And then my book, Chakra Empowerment, is also available Amazon and other places.
Cool. That was going to be one of my questions. I said, you wrote a book, and then you said it was for you. And I was like, well, did you share it with other people?
Chakra Empowerment for Women. And although the mother-child bond is only one, covered in one section of it, I think it's relevant. A lot of it really focuses on women's conditioning that impacts us in parenting, impacts us in everything that we do. So
Absolutely. Yeah. Well, thank you for being on the podcast and for sharing all of your knowledge and wisdom with us and for what you're doing in the world, because we need more healers.
thank you for the work you're doing, and especially helping moms. That has been such a big journey for me, and it's such a beautiful one.
Absolutely. Thank you. And we will have another episode of Perfect Mommy, Imperfect Momming coming for you
Imperfect.
next week.
Absolutely.
Imperfect. Let's do imperfect. Imperfect Momming coming for you next week. And until we meet again, keep healing. Bye, guys.
Thank you for tuning in to Imperfect Momming. It's time for us to step up and realize that our power is not in trying to shape our children. Our power lies in shaping ourselves into the people we want our children to model themselves after. Don't just do it for your kids. Do it for yourself. When you become a more self-aware, compassionate, and confident person, you and everyone around you benefit. For more information about me and my work, visit AliciaLyons.com. That's ALYSIALYONS.com. And until we meet again, keep healing.